All right, we are here, guys, with Ross Leppala from Project Unchained. We're going to dive into mental health today. So excited to have you here, Ross. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andy. I'm excited to be here as well and look forward to adding some value to your listeners' experiences.
Yeah, me too, man. I mean, I've heard a little bit about your story, but let's have you share a little bit about kind of your brief history, kind of with you've had an interesting kind of story from when you were a kid to now as an adult, and give us the quick version of kind of your journey so far.
Yeah, man. I suppose the quick version, growing up in northern Minnesota, a town called Cotton, real small rural town. There was, K through 12. Our school was all in one building. There was about 300 students, so it was real small, and that created an interesting dynamic. As the groups, you didn't have the diversity of the groups. Everybody, it was so small. Everybody was kind of connected, and it seemed like the people that were generational in the town, that grew up in the town, kind of naturally they fit in, and I was not one of those that was generational to the town. So I struggled to fit in pretty significantly. I got bullied a lot in elementary, to the point where at the height of my depression, at the height of the sadness and sorrow inside me, going into 7th grade, it was the summer from 6th grade going into 7th grade, I was suicidal. I wanted it to stop. I felt like that was the only way to get away from it. I felt like that was the only way to make it stop. It became that it wasn't so much that there was so much bullying and teasing at school and on the bus that it became my own self-talk. So I couldn't even get away from it. It became the way I talked to myself even at home. So that, to me, I didn't know how to get away from it. And that became my solution and idea. Fortunately, the day that I was about to take harm on myself, I was able to stop and thought, my parents don't deserve to find me here like this. And so I stopped and was able to get through like the rest of the summer using that as my motivator and my driver. And then that year in 7th grade, I started playing football, and that gave me a place to get my anger and aggression out. I could hit people and not get in trouble for it. So that was pretty awesome. And I ended up being pretty good at it. So I got really sucked in and started lifting weights, and weights became my savior. It was my outlet, my place to get my aggression away. I lived 7 miles from the school, and I liked it so much that I would bike 7 miles one way to lift weights for 3 hours to bike home 7 miles afterwards all summer long. And I couldn't get enough. It was like it saved me, in all honesty. And that was a critical part of my life for many years. And not a lot happened, not anything from a mental health perspective outside of maybe some of the normal lack of confidence. And, I struggled with romantic relationships and things of that nature. And I didn't really understand why. I had no idea why. And I just knew that I was frustrated with a lot of that stuff. And it kind of culminated around the age of 28 when I finally had this realization that all that pain and hurt was still inside me, and that was driving my lack of confidence. That was driving everything. And I didn't know what to do or where to begin on how to start unpacking all that stuff that I just kind of ignored through sports and ignored through trying to be externally validated via accomplishments. And so I hired a therapist and life coach and started working with her, and worked with her for quite a few months. And that was kind of the start of it all for me about 10 years ago. And, now I'm in a really awesome place for myself. I feel like there's nothing that I can't do. If I don't know how to do it, I know I'm capable of figuring out how to do it. And it's a confidence that you're not born with. I had to create it. And
So
I think
maybe
it's one of those things that we can all create if we want to. It just takes some intentional effort. It takes some serious look in the mirror, and it takes embracing some really shitty, dark thoughts in our own mind.
So take me back 10 years ago. What triggered this change? I mean, that is a pretty hard right turn that you took from where you were at. So tell me about kind of like, if you can remember that day or something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that day for sure.
All right. Tell me a little bit about that.
Backing up even a little further from that day, before I talk about that day, I want to set it up with romantic relationships. I struggled with big time. I either was perpetually single, perpetually in the friend zone, perpetually the nice guy, or I was in shitty toxic relationships that were pretty emotionally abusive. It never got physical, but they were emotionally abusive. I was a doormat. I did whatever to try and make the relationship work, and it gave up myself a lot. And that sucked. It was not a lot of fun to go through a lot of those relationships. It wasn't a lot, but it wasn't fun to go through any of those relationships. And then at age 28, I started dating my now partner, Vanessa. And it was long distance at the time, and it was also non-monogamy at the time. It was our first experience with polyamory. And as I'm mowing the lawn one day, I started thinking, like, how worthless I was, and why would anybody want to date me from 5,000 miles away? Like, what is this? I'm nobody. I had no confidence. I got overwhelmed with anxiety and fear and self-doubt, and it was almost paralyzing and debilitating. And it was that moment that I finally realized, like, holy crap, all that pain and hurt and suffering that I had experienced as a kid, and lack of belonging and just lack of confidence, has been with me my entire fucking life. Every bit of it. I just buried it all underneath. And I'm like, man, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of carrying this baggage around. I'm tired of carrying this weight on my back. It's not fun. I need to do something different. I have no idea what that different is, but I need to do something different. Because I really like Vanessa. I really like this person. I really would like for this to work. I would really like for my life to not suck. I'd really like for it to not be so limited. And so I knew I needed to do something different. And that's what kind of pushed me to go reach out and get help. Was I wanted something different. I was tired of living in that pattern, and I needed help breaking that pattern because I had no idea where to even begin.
That's awesome, man. Thanks for sharing that. So as you began that journey, what were some big aha moments or some big pivotal, maybe like the small hinge that swung the big door of going away from feeling like a doormat and people pleaser and kind of putting everybody else ahead of yourself and almost sabotaging your life? Like, what were some key moments in the beginning where you felt like little glimpse of success, or kind of like the light at the end of the tunnel?
So some of the things that my therapist had me doing in the early stages was to reconnect with my child self and develop a relationship with my child self. And that's proven to be really beneficial, to the point where that's still some of the self-care stuff I do to this day, where I'll meditate on like adult Ross and visualize adult Ross playing with child Ross and validating his existence and validating his emotions in the moment and praising him and just caring for him and loving him in ways that I felt like I needed but never got. So that started to shift and change the way that I started to have relationships, in that I prioritized the relationship with myself, because I never had one. I didn't know myself. Everything was always being done to gain acceptance of other people, And so, like, the way I look at it is when I was bullied as a kid, I really wanted friends. What little kid doesn't want to play with other kids? And I didn't get that. I didn't get to play with other kids, so I was always starving for that attention, for that acceptance from other people. And what I realized later on during that time, and what started to create the big shift was, well, it really comes down to me accepting me. And the lack of acceptance from other people ultimately was an expression of the lack of acceptance of myself. So as I developed a relationship with myself and get to know myself and learn to love myself and learn to accept myself wholly and completely just as I am right now in this moment, flaws and all, it creates a big giant shift in the people that are supposed to be in your life naturally come to you in your life. The relationships that are healthy stay healthy. The relationships that are toxic, they just melt away. People just disappear from your life that are not supposed to be in your life. And you become grounded in a sense of your own self-acceptance and belonging.
So, wow, this is deep, man. So it's so funny kind of, as I look back as people look at like personal development or self-development or self-love, and I can put myself in the shoes of somebody who may have not had been as exposed to it, to where it's kind of like they start to eye roll, like, okay, what? I guess they're talking about affirmations in the mirror and all that woo-woo stuff, and kind of like when that egotistic masculine energy comes out, to where it's like, stop being a wuss and all that stuff, and feelings are for women, not for men, and I think that like some of that inner orchestration of a kid and some of that really negative masculine stuff that some men were exposed to growing up from our fathers or other negative male influences in our life. I really like the fact that you're taking it one step further than what most people are willing to go. Like, it seems like most men that I see, they're trying to like numb their inner demons. Like,
right.
And I think a lot of our demons are attached to trauma when we were kids, and some of them are buried and we don't know they're there, and others are quite prevalent, right? So I like the fact that you brought that child Ross to the forefront. I didn't want to ignore that because I thought that was a really unique component to give, turn him into a person again, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Some of my most like powerful breakthroughs that I've had, like meditation wise, where I'll be meditating about it, where adult Ross is playing with child Ross, and I'll remember a moment when, as a child, like I felt really dejected by life and didn't feel like anybody wanted or liked me, and cue me, adult, going to play with child Ross. And man, it gets real sometimes. Like, I get so emotional about it that I will start crying, and I'll be crying in the middle of the meditation, and I'll like come out of it almost like it's like I wasn't in the present moment. Like I went somewhere else in that meditation, and I get done and I'm like, oh, wow. Like, I can feel the tension that I'd been carrying from that day leave my body finally.
Wow. Yeah, I'm listening to a book called Living Untethered, or Untethered Living. I can't remember and he talks about the blockages, like, and most of them are kind of childhood trauma or previous trauma in our life that like are blocking like our inner light out. And I look at myself 5 years ago, I would have heard that and be like, whoa, hold on a second. Like, all this hippy dippy stuff,
right?
Not going to work for me, like, but I'm finally at a place where it's like, okay, this sounds pretty challenging, but I can see the relevance and see on how important it is to address because the great thing that I love that we're having this conversation is the fact that, number one, we're acknowledging the fact that all men have their shit. Like, every man is struggling with this sort of relationship with their previous self, or previous people in their life that damaged them emotionally, for whatever reason. And we all have it. So the number one is you're not alone. And I think that that's an important thing to bring up, because I don't know about you, but there is a lot of loneliness when you're going through a low point in your life,
right?
To where you don't feel connected, and that belonging that you talk a lot about in how you help men through your course, and bringing people through that, and all of the consequences of not belonging. I love the list that you had mentioned, and a lot of those spoke to me. So can you talk a little bit about some of maybe the symptoms of that not belonging feeling right now as a man? Like, let's relate to the guys that are listening to this. Of like, hey, if you're feeling this, like, you're not alone, number one. Number two, there's a path out of it, and let's just acknowledge that for a second.
Yeah, I think one of the things that comes to my mind with that are like the micro infractions, because a lot of times it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's the micro infractions. It's the little things of, there being resistance in a relationship. Say the common one we hear all the time: "Oh, honey, take out the garbage," and you don't want to take out the garbage. Well, why don't you want to take out the garbage? Because you're wanting to sit there and watch your sports, right? Like, oh, the game's on, I can't take the garbage out right now. Well, the game's just a distraction, and so, like, I think about it, like, I was a huge sport head my whole life growing up. I used to watch football every single Sunday, all Sunday long. I'd watch hours and hours and hours of it. And now I realize it was just a big giant distraction to being present in life. And so I think about it along the lines of, if you're consuming sports or movies or anything like that, you're watching other people live their life, and you're not living yours. And that's essentially what all entertainment really is it's entertaining you. You're watching other people be entertaining, and you're not entertaining yourself in your own life and doing your own things and being your own things and creating your own things. And we do that because we're not grounded in beliefs. We're not grounded in our self-acceptance. We're not operating from a place of like wholeness and whole authenticity. So we're filling that void with all of those things. So I look at it as, well, the brutal honesty of it all is that if we're sitting there and distracting our lives with all those things, well, then you don't have a sense of belonging. You don't have a sense of self-acceptance. And like, that can be a hard one to hear, but at the same time, like, it doesn't do any of us any kind of justice or any kind of service if we have these kinds of conversations and blow smoke, And like, I think about a couple of buddies of mine where we have a group that we meet every couple of weeks, and it's a men's group, and a couple of the premises and agreements is we're there to talk about real shit. We need to talk about the realness of life. We're not here to talk about sports. We're not here to talk about the weather. We're here to talk about our relationships. We're here to talk about how we can show up better, how we can be more present, how we can be more attentive to our family, more attentive to ourselves, and at the end of the day, be radically responsible for our life and our life experiences.
That's awesome, man. I think that's something I want to highlight there is the men's group idea, because I think that I listened to the Order of Man podcast years ago,
right?
And he had talked about a study that over 50% of men feel like they don't have any close friends. And there's another book called The Band of Brothers where he talks about rusty friends, where we have these friends from high school or college, or we congregate with because of sporting events or common interest in teams or that kind of stuff. But those are all surface related friendships. And a lot of times you don't have a brotherhood. It's just an acquaintance, right? Like,
Right.
Are they helping you become the best version of yourself? Or are they just a distraction away from your life where you go and bitch about your girlfriend or your wife or your kids or life or politics or society or, list, bullet point, right?
Right.
So how did you go about starting that? Did you start the group or were you invited to it? I mean, tell me a little bit about that group. I'm curious.
It's kind of gone through a couple of different evolutions. Initially, a friend had asked me to be in a men's circle like that, and it was just him and I for a long time. And then, some life changes happened, and him and I kind of drifted apart, and that kind of disbanded that. There was supposed to be another one of his friends, but part of that disbandment was also his other buddy and I, we had butted. It wasn't going to be a good fit, so that played into that. But the current group is a group that I started, and it was, it's three of us, and it was one of those things again where like I realized like this is what I need. I need to have men that I can talk to about my emotions and feelings, because when at least a lot of the masculinity stuff that I read, my partner doesn't want to be bothered by my emotions. She's not my therapist. That's not her job. It's not her role. So when I have another place where I can go and have these conversations about my emotions and be raw and vulnerable with them, the solutions forward find themselves so much easier than if I try and have those conversations with my partner.
Yeah, I want to stop you there because that's a really important point that I don't want us to miss. The fact that the role of your partner is a lot different than like the fairy tale bullshit that we are fed, that your partner needs to be your best friend, your lover, your confidant, all of those things. And that can be a recipe for disaster. Like,
yeah,
because I believe that in my previous marriage. I went through a divorce, and she was everything, all of the above, my best friend, all of those things, and eventually she came to resent me, and probably to this day couldn't explain why. I know why after doing all the self work I have over the last few years, but I think that there's a huge problem in a lot of men's lives is they don't have that group of men that they can be honest and transparent with, and they mistakenly dump all that on their spouse or girlfriend, and she will have empathy and listen, but it may, if done too much or gone to an extreme, it can cause to break the relationship, where all of a sudden years later she'll be like, I just don't love you anymore. I don't respect you. I'm not attracted to you. Or sex will start to go downhill, or attraction will. Right. And she can't necessarily explain why. It just happens over time. Like it just decays almost, right? So I want to just pull that out for a second, that and also acknowledge that your self-awareness to realizing that, because I think that's a huge thing that I'm trying to create too. Is and I haven't done it yet successfully. Is finding kind of that band of brothers that you can connect on a regular basis. Right. That finding the guys that'll carry your coffin when we leave this place, right?
Right.
Or calling you on your shit if you start going away from your best version of yourself towards being not living up to your, as a father or as a partner or as a husband or for work or whatnot. Because it seems like a lot of men, we kind of cycle, right? We go through these seasons.
Right.
And if we don't have people to call us on those seasons when we're straying,
right,
we probably don't have a good group of friends, right?
For sure. And I think one of the ways that the first like masculinity book I read was The Way of the Superior Man by David Deida. Life-changing book. I've read it like 3 times. It's the only book I've read 3 times, and I'll probably read it more times. In all honesty, it's gold. The first time I read it, I was fucking pissed. I'm like, man, everything is my responsibility. It's all me. And I was falling into a bit of a woe is me pity party about it. In all honesty, I was kind of starting to slide, until finally I looked at he's got another book called Dear Lover, which is for the feminine. It's the polarized part of it, and that's the thing, is that we have to have the polarity, the masculine and feminine polarity. That's what makes relationships fucking fiery, is the polarity of it. And once I realized that, I'm like, oh, okay. So there's different roles. Duh. All right, freaking relax, Roz. And so, what really helped me connect with that better, I need to not bring my feelings and emotions to her for her to be this like therapist, is because it depolarizes the relationship, and it also depolarizes the relationship in the sense that it's the masculine's job to provide the direction. The feminine is the energy, the magnitude of it. The masculine provides the direction. And if I'm caught up spinning in my emotions, I'm not providing any direction. And if I'm caught up spinning my emotions, bringing them to her, it dulls her energy. So then not only is her energy dulled, but my direction is in a circle. We ain't going nowhere. So when I make sure, and I'm conscious and I'm aware, and I bring those things to other places that allow me to work through them without burdening her with them, that keeps the polarity remaining, that keeps the direction going, it keeps her energy elevated, and man, we freaking crush life.
So I want to pause there. So I want to put myself in the shoes of one of the listeners, to where, what are some symptoms that would be in a man's life that would mean that they're out of that masculine feminine polarity? Maybe they're spending too much time in before I go there, every man has a balance of masculine and feminine energy. Some have more, some have less, and that's normal, right? Mm-hmm. So what are some symptoms in a relationship, or maybe in a dating relationship, or as a single person, to where that they're out of polarity?
So I think one of the biggest barometers for something like that, to know that energy is off, is your sex life. Where's that at? What's that like? I think if we think about it like when we first get into that relationship, most of the time when we first get into a relationship and it's new and exciting and the energy's high, we're having sex a lot. And when that energy comes down and that polarity comes down, you start having less and less sex. And so if it gets to that point where it's less and less, I mean, not everything can sustain that high level energy that is in the beginning of the relationship. So it's going to not stay at that level. It's okay for it to come down. But if it just always goes down to the point where it becomes nothing, well, then there's no polarity. There's no energy. The relationship is flat. And it's flat because of the masculine feminine balance, and that energy is not in balance.
This is such a sensitive topic because
guys hate talking about sex.
Well, there's so much ego attached to it, right? It's like dick size, like all of a sudden people are like, oh, I'm great at sex and sex is great in my life, but there's also like all of these stand-up comedians and movies, and it's almost like standard culture that when you get married or in a long-term relationship, eventually sex starts to suck. It goes to once a month. It goes once every other month, or all of those things. And I think one of the things that you had mentioned is ownership. How can men take ownership over that, right? Like, put your ego aside. How does one go about doing that? Like, what advice would you give to a guy who maybe was in a sexless marriage, or is in a relationship that they don't feel like their needs are being met, like what would be some steps that you would give them to start shifting to start earning that back, right?
Presence. It's all about presence. How present are you in life? Or how distracted are you in life? And again, that's where, like, especially for men in our culture, sports, man, like, it's such a distraction for us. I mean, and that's coming from I'm a coach. I'm a powerlifting coach. So I'm like in sports all day long. But when at the end of the day, when I'm done working, if I start talking about this lift or that, this PR this PR that, man, shut the fuck up. Like, that's not going to facilitate any kind of goodness in our relationship. So what is the presence? Are you present with your partner? Are you present with that person, with that feminine? And that's the greatest gift that you can have and give. How distracted are you? Because at the end of the day, if you're present, another one we hate too, right? It's not so much talking about sex, because we measure ourselves against porn, which is unrealistic, and all these other things that we measure ourselves against that are unrealistic because they're made for entertainment purposes, not real life purposes. What is our ability to handle the shit test? The simple little things when they make a jab. Are you bothered by it? If you're bothered by it, that means you're not present, you're not grounded. And the more present you are and the more grounded you are, guess what? The shit tests subside. They'll never go away. There's always going to be those jabs, because that's a feminine's job, is to make sure that you're present, to make sure you're being authentic, to make sure you're being you. And she wants nothing less. Even if it pisses her off, she still doesn't want anything less than that. It's okay for her to be pissed off. But if she's got a harp on you to take the garbage out, you're not present. If she's got a harp on you to have a creative date night, you're not present. If she's got a harp on you to find creative ways to have sex because the same shit that we're always doing is boring, you're not present. And when you're present, you're not distracted. You also realize those things, and you're like, hey, you know what? That is kind of getting boring. What can I do? Because I'm the one here to provide the direction to spice this shit up. Oh, I'm gonna surprise her. I'm gonna be like, hey, your suitcase is packed. We're leaving in 10 minutes. There's nothing planned this weekend. You know, like, look at the calendar. Is it open this weekend? I mean, you can plan something. You can plan a month and 2 months in advance. You can do all that. That's fine. Just don't tell her. Surprise her with it.
So much there. There's so much there that we can unpack, and there's so much depth to this topic, and it's one of those topics that's, when you're in it, it's so obvious,
right?
Like, you can see it, but when you're not in it, it's so overwhelming, and it's so hard. If you're in the mindset or in I call it the victim mindset, and that's one of the things with Resistingbeta is that we're all resisting kind of in our inner beta energy, like, and that's kind of like the victim mindset. It's all encompassing around that, and embracing our alpha energy, and
right.
being able to display that to be a centered man, which, if you're a centered man, you will attract positive feminine energy, right? If you're off center, or if you're playing too far into the victim role, blaming and letting your woman lead too much. And I love that when you talked about the fielding her jabs, right? And not letting them throw you off course. Because I think that a lot of men, they will react to their women's jabs, whether it be suffering in silence and then like building a little ball of resentment that someday you will unleash hell on her of the 3 months of resentment that you've built up because she left a sock on the ground. And it wasn't about the sock. It was about the 100 other, like, oh man, like the Will Smith slap. The Will Smith slap was an interesting, like, little dichotomy of this topic, to where, like, he must have had such a ball of resentment in him, or anger at Jada, that he took it out on Chris Rock, right?
There's something going on there.
There's something there. Like, I could feel it.
We might not ever know the truth, but there was something.
Well, I saw a video where they had talked about, Jada talking about how she still misses Tupac, and that Tupac was the love of her life, and publicly on Instagram, right? So it was kind of like shoving his face in it a bit,
right?
And they also have an open relationship, but I'm wondering if Will isn't 100% on board with it, or he's building up some bad energy with it, or resentment, and not talking about it. So anyway, that just reminded me of this topic where in the book, we had talked about the book No More Mr. Nice Guy before we started the conversation. He talked about these covert contracts, right, where as a nice guy you do things to get things. Like, if I take out the trash and remodel the bathroom, I get sex.
You're building up some bad juju there. I mean, and that's something that's one of the things that I got to deal with too, that I got work through. And that's one of the things that I bring to my circle with my buddies, is talking through this kind of stuff, like, because then it can shine light on it, right? Like, I'll talk about, oh man, I was so frustrated because of ABC, because I remodeled the bathroom and I didn't get sex, right? And then they'd call me on that shit and be like, dude, that's because you remodeled the bathroom from a misaligned intention. You remodel the bathroom because you want to remodel the fucking bathroom. You don't remodel the bathroom because of that. Like, you got to show up and own it and choose it. And she's going to feel that. And especially for me, because my partner's an energy worker, so if I don't come to the table with the right energy, she's going to know about it.
Wow. Yeah, my girlfriend, she is one of the most empath people. Like, she feels energy. Oh, she lives an hour away. And she can feel my energy from an hour away. Well, sometimes she'll just message me and she'll be like, something's off with you. And I'll be like, whoa.
Yeah.
And I think that is important that you mentioned that to her. It's like, of living in that masculine energy is such a key to living a fulfilled life. And
right. I think one of the big dots that I like to connect with some of this stuff too is we've grown up in a culture and a society where we were suppressed right out of the fucking gates. Like, we're set up to lose this game in a sense, right? Like, be a good little boy, don't cry, blah, 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 don't have feelings, don't feel this, don't feel that. And so we've been conditioned to suppress the shit out of it. And we don't know how to deal with it, and we don't know how to express it in a good way. We don't know how to express it in a healthy way. We don't know how to express it in a way that supports the polarity of the masculine and feminine. So when we get attached and we get in this relationship and we're attached to this relationship, we start to feel this ability to release it. We start to create and connect with our partner, with our lover, as though they're our mother, because she's the feminine energy that we didn't get in the softness when we were having feelings as a kid. And so we want to put that on them, and we can't. It's not there. That's not your partner, your lover, your wife, whatever. She's not there to be your mom. She's there to be the feminine energy in your life, in a loving way, in a lover way, not a mothership way. There's a difference. So at the end of the day, like, from a mental health perspective, we have to grow our mental emotional intelligence so that we can have our feelings, because it's still really damn important to have our feelings. Feelings are your guide. They are your compass to direct you towards things that you like and away from things that you don't like, as a very simple way to put it. So we want our feelings. We want to be connected with them. We want to know what they mean and understand. It's really important. And when we can be that way and we can be grounded that way, then we don't either hold things in and blow up, or we don't project them and vomit them all over her, and we bring them to the places, we develop the places that we need to bring them and bring them there and work through them. Like my journal is, you know, because we only meet, my buddies, we only meet every other week, so a lot can happen in 2 weeks. So my journal is one of my best friends in the whole world, and that's my savior. I gotta, anytime Vanessa and I have a little bit of an argument or something like that, I come to my journal and I start talking with myself about it. And every single time I get to the point, she's right. There is struggle and there is resistance because I denied my personal responsibility in this, and I was not allowing my emotions, my connection with my emotions, to really guide me. I was being lost in them and projecting them rather than connecting with myself and knowing what they meant for me.
I love the fact that you brought up the journal component, and also the fact that focusing, using the word of practice was a key component in my shift from a victim mindset to where I'm at. Because I think as men, we want to have it all figured out. We're very logical. It's like, oh, we look at successful people and like, oh yeah, he's just got it all wrapped up. That guy's got it. I don't. Something wrong with me, but that's him. That's not me. I can never get there type stuff, right? But one of the things that was a huge pivotal moment for me was practice, and giving yourself the grace that practice means you're never going to have it figured out.
For sure. Sure.
Because there's going to be bumps in the road, and it's always going to be a constant, evolving and growing. And I think that's, I commend you on your level of self-awareness and dedication to yourself, because I think that journaling is one of those things that I've done myself. And when I was going through my divorce, I actually did like a video kind of journal where I journaled my whole process on TikTok. That's how I got.
Oh, wow.
That's how I kind of got through it, where it was allowing me to kind of be authentically myself and put myself out there, and letting people potentially judge me, but most people just accepted me. And it was like, oh, wow, I can feel love from being my authentic self. Like I don't have to hide that. And I think it's so important. And journaling kind of helps you navigate that road where it's like every day where you just kind of get your thoughts on paper. And I bought a book called The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. And I read a daily journal quote every single day. So I love that you brought up the fact that journaling kind of helps you through that, because I don't know what percentage of men actually use a journal. I bet it's small, but all of the men that I've met that I would love to emulate and see as a centered masculine man, many of them have adapted some sort of practice around journaling. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, man. It's definitely one of my go-to self-care tools. And it was definitely one I resisted for a long time, because I held on to this idea and belief and idea that it was for, grade school girls. And, well, I'm a man. I'm not a grade school girl. I can't do that. And yeah. You know what? At the end of the day, guess what? I can do anything I want. I can do anything I want. Even, you know what? Real life vulnerability, things that are going on in my life right now. My daughter's gotten into Pokemon, and I'm like, Pokemon, like, why Pokemon? And I have this fucking hardship with it. And as soon as I have this hardship with it, the relationship I have with my daughter starts to have some struggles. Like, we're disconnected. She's acting out at me. It's just not as nice and fluid as it was before. And I'm like, where am I creating this resistance? Pokemon. So I'm like, all right, dude, just because you didn't like Pokemon as a kid doesn't mean you have to hold on to that now. Like, be a man, step into what she likes for her and connect with her. Like, do this. And so I shifted and started doing some different Pokemon things, and bam, just 180, instant connection right back to it. And so like that's huge. And that for me is like any time I'm struggling in life, it's like, where am I creating resistance? I have to own this. And that almost always comes down to, you mentioned judgment earlier when you were talking about getting through your divorce, and there was some of that fear of judgment going and putting yourself out there on TikTok. Like there's this like loop of judgment where in our heads, whether we say it out loud or not, we're judging other people. And we fear judgment of other people because that's what's going on in our head, is we're judging other people too. All right? So we fear judgment because we judge other people. And so the way to stop fearing that judgment is to stop judging other people. But we can't do that until we create the acceptance around ourselves. Until we accept ourselves wholly and completely, there's going to be judgment. And we're going to judge others, and then we're going to judge ourselves, and we're going to perceive that other people are judging us. And the key to that is through acceptance. And back to the Pokemon thing, it's acceptance, right? The only thing that blocked that acceptance, that created that resistance, was an egoic attachment to my not liking Pokemon as a kid. Because as a kid, I liked sports and baseball and basketball and stuff like that. So I traded basketball and baseball cards. And I got annoyed as a kid that people started trading Pokemon cards. And I'm like, what the? This is dumb. It's all sports. And so I got attached to that. And attachment creates resistance. Resistance is your stress. So anytime there's stress in life, your stress is an indicator of where there's attachment and where there's resistance. Well, that's your attachment. That's your resistance. That's yours. When it's yours, you got to own it. And then you can change it. You can shift it.
I love that you brought that up. The Living Untethered book, he talks about the definition of suffering is where we set our own expectations and something's not living up to those, right?
Yep.
So you're feeling that suffering of your daughter might not be liking the things you want her to like, and she's liking something that you had negative emotions towards as a kid or whatever. But as a father figure, like when your kids don't meet up to those expectations, like it causes suffering inside us. And the fact that you've worked through that level of self-awareness is a pretty amazing feat to me, and I'm proud of you, man. That's awesome.
I appreciate it.
Realizing that versus just building resentment and allowing there to be a rift between you and your daughter, that all of a sudden there'll be like the masculine and feminine energy banging into each other, not between you and a spouse, but between you and your child. Or that, I think that's awesome that you realize that, and I've uncovered that, and like, okay, how do I move past this? That's a testament to you as a man and as a father, for sure. So,
and being a parent has been really awesome for this journey. It wouldn't have been back before I became a seeker. It wouldn't have been before I became more growth minded set. But when you have a kid, now there's all kinds of things that I look at and I'm like, how can I do better? How can I be better? How can I show up better? How can I pass on as little of my bullshit onto her as I can? And so, like, it takes on a little bit different of a look to it. Instead of it just being self-care of, journaling and some of that stuff, it also becomes a matter of being introspective of the connection and relationship with her. Because consuming a lot of the parenting stuff that I've consumed shows me, and I can look back at my life through a different lens, and that's where I find and able to connect with a lot of that stuff that I was not aware of, stuff in the unconscious, and connect with it and dissipate its energy and tension. And there is a book, The Conscious Parenting, and in there they talk about, like, you're like basically your children's behavior. Your children is going to be your mirror, your reflection. They are your opportunity for soul growth, because they're going to reflect back to you your unconscious hurt. And so, like, it's because of that book that I'll ask myself questions like that whenever I'm feeling a bit disconnected with Rosalie. Like, where am I creating this resistance? What is she showing me right now? Because there's an opportunity here, and it's a beautiful opportunity, and I'd be an idiot to waste it. And I think about it too, like if we're talking about this from a masculine standpoint, right? Like thinking about resisting beta and bringing out that alpha energy, like that is that alpha energy. For a long time, I resisted I always hated the word alpha because I thought it meant being an asshole, and it's not. It means being able to stand in your own shit and look at yourself in the mirror and call yourself out and be like, hey, dude, you're not showing up good. Stand up, show up, be present.
Yeah, I think this is full circle stuff, man. So I'm glad that we got on the topic of parenthood, because if we don't figure out our stuff, we will pass it on to our kids, right? If you, I think this is a good point to bring out, to where it's like, if you don't figure this out and solve it right now for yourself and maybe for your romantic relationships, because I know there's a lot of men out there kind of going their own way and saying, hey, I'm done with women altogether and all that stuff, because they're just blanketly like ignoring it, right?
Right.
But what about the kids or your nephews or your nieces or your own children? Like, what impact do you want to just reciprocate what you got from your parents and the trauma and all of those things and just pass it on to the next generation? Or do you want your kids to be a better version of you? And I think as parents, that is our goal, right? So having as much ammo in or as many tools in your tool belt to help your kids feel belonging and not have to go through the traumatic events as much as possible. I mean, some things are outside of your control as a parent. Bullying and all of those things are probably going to happen. But if you have passed on your level of self-awareness and through little bits and pieces, I think that can make a big difference. So I think that we've come full circle here to when we started talking about how with your course that you have, helping people feel that belonging themselves and giving them the bite-sized pieces to help move them from where they're at to where they want to become. Because I think that's a really overwhelming thing. And I think it's easy as a man to look at a guy who is centered in his masculinity and be like, I could just never be that guy. And hearing all of these things, reading a book, and you're trying to do it all at once. You're just trying to like, okay, I need to journal, I need to meditate, I need to work out, I need to eat right. And then you do it, try to do it all. And then you fail somewhere, and then you beat yourself up. And then you're back into the depths of depression and all of these things. Right. I think the full circle component is I wanted you to talk a little bit about the project that you're excited about in the course that you've built and helping men fix the belonging problem.
Yeah.
Wanting to belong.
Yeah. Yeah. It's called the Belonging Blueprint because some of the parenting stuff that I learned, it boils down to every child's most basic need is to feel a sense of belonging and significance. There's no such thing as a bad child. There's no such thing as a misbehaved child. Only a child who lacks belonging and significance. So through that lens, a lot of times, Rosalie's misbehaving. She's lacking a sense of belonging and significance. There's something that she's not connected with. What do I need to show up and provide that to her? That's my job right now. As dad, that's my job, is to provide her with a sense of belonging and significance. And there's a whole lot of different ways to do that for a child. One of the easiest ones that helps us all feel that helps for children is choice. Like, empower her with choice. Like, I don't control what she wears for the day. She picks out what she wears. So I remodeled her closet and put all her clothes on her level. She picks it out. Go pick something out to wear today. Empowered with choice. So there's all kinds of little simple things like that for kids. And so I think what happens a lot of times is if we as kids grow up and we don't have that, and we're not taught that sense of belonging and significance, and we're not empowered in that way growing up, and our behavior gets controlled. And, you know, when we're a bad kid and we get spanked and punished and grounded and things like that, instead of being fulfilled in a positive way, we lack and grow up lacking that sense of belonging and significance. And so what happens is we seek it externally. The thing about any external validation, an accomplishment, you win a trophy, you win the award, blah, 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 all that shit's fleeting. It goes away. It's a temporary high. Oh yeah, I won. 2 days later, nobody gives a shit. You know? Like, let's be honest. I can't even remember who won Super Bowl last year now. Like, I'd have to think about it for a minute. That's how much it matters. And most people are like that, right? Like, we don't remember who won this or that even. Yes, we can figure it out. But regardless, external validation is fleeting. It's not something you can take with you, and it's temporary. The belonging blueprint and cultivating a sense of belonging is internal. It's learning how to create internal validation and learning how to create it within yourself for the relationship with yourself. And you have to develop the relationship with yourself. You have to learn yourself. You have to know yourself. You have to know your values and beliefs. You have to learn to understand, to connect with your emotions. So you can bring that shit anywhere with you. And what's cool about it too is, like, at the end of the day, there's one relationship that you can never, ever, ever walk away from. You can walk away from your mom, you can walk away from your dad, you can walk away from your spouse, you can walk away from your son or your daughter. You can walk away from any one of those people at any point in time in your life. You can never walk away from yourself. You're always with yourself. So yourself, the most important relationship in your life is with yourself. So you have to cultivate that relationship. It has to be the best relationship in your life. And thusly, rooting that in a sense of belonging is going to do that. Because if you don't feel like you belong, it's likely because you're disconnected from yourself. You don't have a good relationship with yourself. So it's really all about grounding yourself in the relationship with yourself, in creating an internal sense of belonging. And then you always have it with you everywhere you go, no matter what.
And is that journey something that the blueprint will help a man with?
Yes.
Or anybody with? I mean, kids or men or whoever going through that process. Is it mainly geared for adults or kids?
It's more adults.
Okay.
It's going to require a certain level of intelligence that it wouldn't work for a kid. Gotcha. There's ideas and concepts that I think that consuming it as a parent would help you teach that to a kid. But I don't think that a kid would not be able to consume the course and go through that. So gotcha. It's definitely a lot more geared towards adults.
And I think that a lot of, as a man, it's demonstrating, not saying, right? So you have to internalize this stuff to demonstrate it, to live in your masculine energy, to attract a woman, right?
Yeah.
Whether she's married to you or whether you haven't met her yet, you have to be there. And I think that's the same thing as a parent too, but just kind of in a different role, different end result, is that you need to demonstrate that, because your kids are going to test the living crap out of you.
Oh yeah, they are. For sure. And look, I mean, one of the things that I think is so important to connect with that too is just, look, when you do stuff for other people, there's an expectation there. If it's say the old garbage thing, you took the garbage out and you're like, okay, I took the garbage out. I better make sure to tell her so she knows that I took the garbage out. Boom, right there, you're doing it for somebody else. You're not doing it for you. That's seeking external validation. When you're grounded in that internal validation and you take the garbage out just because it's time to take the damn garbage out, you don't need the accolation. You don't need the recognition. You just do it because you step into the roles, you step into the things that you know you need to do to take care of and handle life. It doesn't matter. You just do it because you want to. And in that dissolves that resistance. that removes the gap between expectation and reality. And when that gap goes to zero, oh man, everything just flows, and it just is, and there's acceptance, and there's way less stress, and man, it's just a beautiful way to live life. It's so much more peaceful and loving and caring, and it's just a really cool feeling compared to thinking back to where I was 10 years ago.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I think that this is just a really important conversation, and I feel like we could talk for hours about this topic. I want to end every episode giving a baby step. I think that one of my things I get guilty of is I listen to something like this, especially if I was deep down where I was at just 2 years ago. It's like, okay, yeah, all that sounds great. What is one thing that, the hinge they'll swing the big door towards, like they'll get a lot of benefit out of if they just, it might take 5 or 10 minutes for the next 7 days, right? When they first wake up, what is one thing that the homework that you would kind of give our listeners to get a lot of benefit over the next 7 days? What would be that one thing that you would say, hey, just do this, and at the end of the 7 days, it's a win? What would you say?
Well, I'm going to say 2 things, because 2 things come to mind. I think because and these 2 things really hinged on each other for me to really take that scary ass step forward. One, like the first thing, when I was looking for that therapist and looking for that coach and support, I found her. I liked what the talk. I felt like she was a good fit, but I resisted. I was like, oh, I don't want to spend the money. I don't, and I just resisted spending the money. I was being cheap about it. And I finally said, thought to myself, I'm like, dude, you spend money on all these other things, gym membership, blah, 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 blah. You spend money going hunting, fishing, all this other stuff. Spend money on yourself, on you, and choose yourself just once. Finally, just one time. Choose yourself. You do all these things that aren't choosing you. Choose you for once. And so I finally did that. I finally felt like I started to choose me instead of everything else around me. And so that was like the first little shift, was to start choosing myself. And that immediately also, without prompt from the therapist or coach, took me into, I need daily gratitude. I'm going to start doing a daily gratitude. And I start out small, and I actually would do it like 2 times a day. I'd do it when I'd wake up. First thing I do, go look in the mirror, and you know what? Today I'm grateful for the comfy bed I got to sleep in. Today I'm grateful for toothpaste. It was simple, small stuff like that. And that started to bring some positivity to my life. And it got to the point where, man, now it's so easy to just look around and constantly see stuff all day long that I'm grateful for. And so it became an idea of doing it just once a day. And then I was like, oh no, I'm going to do it in the morning when I wake up and at night before I go to bed, to now it's just all day long. And one of the reasons I really like the idea of that gratitude and starting that gratitude snowball and letting it grow into effect is because at the end of the day, when you are allowing yourself to really feel that gratitude for something, you cannot also be in suffering. You cannot be in gratitude and in suffering at the same time. And that was really beneficial for me to start shifting out of that mindset and be beneficial for me to shift into a growth mindset and a seeker mindset and away from the victimhood of it all.
So the homework would be grab a piece of paper right when you wake up, and right before you go to bed, write down something you're grateful for. Yeah. Is that what I'm hearing?
That works too. I did it. I said it out loud to myself in front of the mirror. And some people might not feel comfortable with that. Writing it down is fine too. Whatever it is, however it is for you that you can express it, but just start doing it. And again, I really liked doing it out loud to myself just because that for me, that makes shit real.
Sure.
Right? It brings a level of realness to it. And if I'm just kind of, at least especially at that point in my life, if I just kind of thought it was still just bullshit because I didn't have the integrity with myself at that point. Now it's a lot different. Now I can just look around and think it because I'm in integrity with myself. But at that point, I needed to say it out loud to make it real.
Okay. Cool. Well, Ross, we're coming near the end of our time here. We've unpacked a lot, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions. Where can people connect with you if they have any questions or what they want to reach out?
They can find me on Instagram. My personal Instagram is ross.leppala. I also have an Instagram for Project Unchained. It's just Project Unchained. And Facebook, Ross Leppala. I'm open anywhere there.
Awesome. Well, guys, make sure you check out the Project Unchained podcast. Ross has been doing that for about 1.5 years now. Yep. I'll link the Belonging Blueprint on the show notes here, so you can go check that out. It's an action step, because I think that the difference between ownership and victim is taking action on one thing.
Agreed.
Just do it. Get over that fear. Get over the whatever resistant is there. Usually it's money for me. Money or time. Like, I don't have time for that, or I don't have the money. Those are the two things, and that's just an excuse. So take action. Live in that masculine energy. Lead yourself first, and then figure everything else will fall into place, because we have to start with us. So, Ross, I really appreciate this conversation. I got a ton out of it. I love the one thing I love about wisdom is the fact that the more I know, the more I learn how far I have to go. And especially seeking external validation, that is a huge problem that I'm dealing with on a daily basis. I'm like, okay, how do I get over that, right? So I appreciate you bringing that to light.
For sure.
And everything you talked about today. So thank you so much for being here. I got a ton out of it.
Yeah, awesome, Andy. I super appreciate you having me on. It was fun. I always like chatting about these things and having more real conversations with depth and things that I think we all need to talk about a little bit more.